your host, Milos speaking. Welcome to an International Week edition of the Serbian Football Show. Happy everybody's joining us again as we return after a couple-week break to discuss everything in the world of Serbian football, primarily the upcoming start of the World Cup qualifiers for Serbia. Joined by a special guest today, like every week, my man Luka. Luka, your final days in Mexico, how's it going down there?
It's going well, man. Enjoying the final few days of sunshine, but ready to get back to the States for sure.
That's right. And Alexa, I know you just made it to the States from Serbia. How are you doing, man? How's Chicago?
Chicago's been pretty good. It's kind of snowy. It's a bit frustrating considering that I brought my recording equipment, and because of the delay and everything, this quality of the show might not be what our dear wide viewer fan base would hope, but there was too many things going on for us not to do a show. I'm very excited to get going. There's a lot to talk about. This might be one of the most packed shows we're going to do. So let's just get into it.
That's right. Let's get into it this week. Wednesday, the start of World Cup qualifying. Serbia takes on Ireland in our first match. Basically a must, if not a must-win, but a must-not-lose match because we'll probably be fighting it with Ireland for second place. Massive game for us, and it's important for Dragan Stojkovic, the new manager, to get off to a winning start and build some confidence with the team. We saw the squad announced as well the other week, and it looks like a pretty strong squad as expected. Not many surprises. Ireland, we know they've been struggling. We know that they haven't won, I think, They haven't won in 9 games, and they've only scored 2 or 3 goals in those 9 games. So they're definitely a team that's going through a bit of a generation change, a transition from an old manager to a new manager with Stephen Kenny. But he has had the team for a while now. He's had time to figure things out. They are bringing in younger players that are probably going to be the focus of their team now. You see guys like Cullen and Knights and O'Shea and Connolly. I think that's the guys they're going to try to build around. And they're kind of similar position with us, where they're trying to rebuild things for a younger generation. Obviously, their team and their players are a lot lesser known than our players because, most of our young players are playing in top 5 leagues for decent name clubs, and their players are, in the championship or just getting going with, bench appearances or sporadic appearances with Premier League clubs. But definitely not overlooking Ireland because they're going to cause us problems, I'm sure. I know they haven't scored a lot of goals. Obviously, their attack with Shane Long and the other guys they have, it's not very menacing, so that doesn't really strike fear into you. But they're a team that, when I watch their games in the Nations League, they didn't win. They didn't create many chances, but I think they did a great job of being organized. They had a lot of possession in those games. They're definitely a decent side, and I think if you haven't won a game in 9 games, if you haven't won in 9 internationals, you're definitely due for a good performance, and they had a manager who's been with them for a while. I'm sure he's well prepared for this. I wouldn't really be too surprised if they did get a result in Belgrade. We're in we just got a manager not that long ago. Things are in a bit of a flux right now. We don't really know what formations he's going to play or how the team will look or what players will be fielded. It's all up in the air for us. Obviously, we have more talent than Ireland. Obviously, we should win if things were based on paper alone. But, it's not the way it works. We saw that against Scotland, where we clearly had a more talented team on paper, and they beat us on penalties, and they outplayed us in that game. That cost us qualification to the Euros. So I can easily see history repeating itself and us failing again, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Luka, what are your thoughts on the start of World Cup qualifying and the game against Ireland?
Yeah, man. First I would have to say that, just looking at Pixie's interviews and stuff about the upcoming game and the upcoming games, plural, he's putting it seems like a lot of pressure on himself and on the team, which I actually, if it was any other manager, I would probably have a problem with it. But since it's him, I really don't, because the media was going to put that pressure on Serbia anyway, to win. Like you said, we're stronger on paper. We should win, and the media expects it. So the pressure was going to be there anyway. It seems like he's putting extra pressure on there. But I do love that he's channeling it in an aggressive manner. That appeals to me. I think that is the mindset that we should have with the talent that we do have. As far as the squad, like you said, not many surprises. I like it. Looks good. It looks like we're turning the corner, going with a bunch of younger players for the future. Some of the positions are no-brainers for me. For example, with our strikers, we have Mitrovic, Jovic, and Vlahovic and Despotovic. It's a no-brainer. I think Vlahovic needs to start this one. He's the man in form. He hasn't had a bad game for Serbia yet when he's come on as a sub, or even started. So, some of this stuff writes itself. The formation remains to be seen. I wish we could have had a friendly or two before the matches, but obviously because of Corona and because of the shit show that was announcing the new manager in the first place. A couple of weeks before the first qualifier, I understand why we didn't have a friendly. I'm expecting a big result. I think it is a must-win. Even if we get a draw or whatever, I think that's going to be bad for us. I think it is a must-win, which is not very inspiring starting off the campaign on a must-win game, but it's a game we should win, and I expect us to win it.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned some of the criticism Pixie is getting from people in the media or fans saying that he sounds too confident, or that him saying that we're going to play beautiful dynamic football is like him being too brash or whatever. But those are the same people who were saying that when Tumba said that we'll pray to God against Holland, Erling Holland, and that we're not the favorites against Norway or Scotland. They're the same people criticizing him for not being confident. Exactly. And for not getting a belief in the team. So you can't win with Serbian fans, Serbian media. Everybody's so fickle here. And even if he was the other way, the same way as Tumbakovic was, he would be getting criticized even more. So it doesn't really matter. I actually like his comments. I like that he seems to have a plan. He's confident in the players. Obviously, he's aware of our shortcomings. He's in interviews. You can see that he's done a lot of analysis on our past games and our past failures. Also, like that he's called out a lot of players. He called out SMS Sergej, called out Tadic, called out Kostic, saying that they play great for their clubs, but he hasn't seen them play consistently at that great level for the national team and in that unit. So I do like these things. I think Pixie's a hero and a legend here. So the players will definitely listen to him. Obviously, he does seem to be a pretty guy that knows what he wants. He's definitely going to be a bit of a disciplinarian, I'm sure, just judging by his comments. So that might not mesh well with every player. It might not connect with every player, but I think it should connect with most of them, and that will be a big help for us. The squad, no surprises. We saw the end of some veterans like Luka Milinkovic, as well as Maksimovic and Ljajic and Kolarov, most notably. That is what it is. Those guys, we have younger players at those positions, and some of those guys have not been putting in good performances for a while anyways. So not a big loss. It's time for some younger faces to get a chance, and for a new generation to give it a go. Alex?
Well, I completely agree with what you said in regards to the media. I think that the Serbian football public in general is extremely harsh, and Serbian sports public in general can be extremely harsh. Even our basketball team, when they go far, there's always criticism, and there's always things that people aren't going to like. So, in regards to Pixies, well, first of all, I guess you can go chronologically in terms of the squad. The guys that were left off were pretty much the guys we mostly expected to be left off, apart from Milinkovic, who I still think should be there, but obviously, considering the interview he gave, that seems to be completely off the cards now. We'll talk about that at some point. Kolarov and the other guys, Kolarov, we knew he was gone. Maksimovic has not played well for the national team ever, has been responsible for so many bad games, and Ljajic was somebody that's really just been playing recreational football in Turkey, so them not being there isn't really that much of a problem. A lot of hoopla around the two right backs that were called up, with Kajic and Petkovic. But again, I guess it's there just in case of an emergency. If we need to go forward back and if our center backs are shot, you'd want them to be there. The center back situation is such that the quality isn't really there, but the amount of center backs we have can hopefully make up for that. And the rest of the team, some of the guys like Ivan Ilic and Uroš getting call-ups was very nice. I think they've been playing great in their clubs, and all the other positions, as you said, are pretty much covered. Pixie's stance is such that I can see it going two ways. I've tweeted this out multiple times. He's either going to be like Marko Slavnic, who came into the basketball team, like another celebrated former player who was very confident and cocky almost, and it ended up resulting in us having the worst tournament in the history of the basketball team. Or he's going to be like Sasha Djordjevic, who took us to 3 finals and won three silver medals, and I don't think there's a way to go in between. His positive approach is good in the sense that this is a team that desperately lacks confidence. I think this is a team that needs somebody to be by their side because so many people have left them, not just in terms of the fans themselves, but the FA, which has not been kind to them, considering all the chaos that has gone on. But the mechanism in which he wants to accomplish his goals is a bit iffy. I am for him talking about playing beautiful football and creative and being nice to watch and getting results at that. The problem is knowing the way Serbian football functions. If he doesn't get a big results in his first qualifying campaign, I would hope that it doesn't mean he gets fired. What he's talking about demands time. Now, if he knows that he's going to have that time, I think that him talking about this is great. I think it's good that he's insisting on it, but we know that things in Serbia can change so often that there's no guarantee he's going to get through the 2 qualifying campaigns. And even if he does, national team football is much different than club football because, it's not about certain automatic principles that work in club football where you have certain patterns of play and you have certain set plays that you practice. International football, they haven't had more than 2 practices before this 3-match set. And getting us to play as well as he would hope us play, he's going to be very hard. Much better teams than us have had issues with that. So I'm not sure how realistic his goal is. And I think that his positive attitude is right in theory, but I think in principle he's maybe put a bit of a weight on his back because people are going to expect us to play like that instantly. And I think that Milos and Luke, you guys can attest to this. I don't think any manager has had this kind of groundswell of support when he's come in, probably since Mirantic or maybe even Siniša Mihajlović, because everybody's unanimously on Pixie's side. And if it doesn't go right instantly, I'm hoping that he's not in trouble, and I'm hoping that he stays the course. What the formation is going to be is a complete mystery to anybody. There's so many ways we can play. What he said in terms of the principles being more important than the formation, I agree with, because we can play with 5 at the back and be an attacking team like we were with Muslim, or we can be 3 at the back like we were with Krstajic, and we can't get past the halfway line. So I'm very interested to see where he goes. I agree with the Vlahovic point. He's by far the most informed striker. Nobody else can fit. Plus, he gives us so many different options.
Right.
Whereas Mitrovic is either just a target man and Jovic is just someone who can move around. Vlahovic can probably do a bit of both. I'm not saying that those other 2 guys can't do other things. It's just that they have a significant strength that pops out. Vlahovic is more an all-around player who, as you said, has been great for the national team every time he's come on. He's been an impact maker off the bench, and if anyone's deserved that opportunity, it's him. What Ireland's going to do, I'd like to touch on them quickly. The Scotland game is going to be in a lot of people's minds because, again, we're going up against a team from the British style of football, and we know that Ireland is extremely passionate when it comes to their players and extremely passionate when it comes to their national team, and they're going to give everything they have. It's a team that is trying to advance itself from a more defensive-minded approach. You guys remember the team we played in the Russia qualifiers with Martin O'Neill was very defensive, and then they had Mick McCarthy as their manager, which was even more defensive. And if they had some of their players that didn't defend, like Jack Grealish and Declan Rice, I actually think this game would be a very close one, and I'd be worried. But when you look at their team, I tweeted out that they have Robbie Brady, who's been playing as a fullback and as a midfielder for Burnley. They have him classified as a forward because they don't have anyone who can play there. James McLean has gained like 50 pounds from his old days when he used to be pretty quick. They don't even have their best striker in McGoldrick, and they're kind of shuffling between Shane Long and Aaron Connolly. Their best threats are Kieran Clark and Shane Duffy at center back because that's the only way they can really threaten you from set pieces. And even their fullbacks, their two best players, Seamus Coleman and Matt Doherty, have both been in bad form. The Spurs just went out to Dinamo, and Doherty was a big reason for that. And Seamus Coleman's been kind of on and off. He's 32 years old. So I don't see a way in which they can threaten us. Now, we know our defense can be a dumpster fire, and we can concede even to the worst of teams. But I think that if we come out with a strong pressure and if we just try to attack them on the side, I think we could be really dangerous. And I'm very intrigued to see the lineup Pixie puts out. I think the great thing with this 3-match cycle is that he can rotate and everyone can get minutes. And we have players who can actually answer every type of challenge, mostly. If we need to go strong and if we need to go long ball, we have guys that are very tall that can play the ball down. We have guys that can pass between each other and play really nice combinations like Tadic and Juricic and others if we go up against a team that's stronger than us. So it's going to be interesting. I just hope that what they did against Scotland, they don't do here, which is they waited until like the 70th minute to have a strong and definitive approach. If we don't come out for minute 1 and press them on their half, I fear that it might be more of the same. Maybe not to that level because I think Scotland has a much better team than Ireland. Scotland at least has 2 or 3 great players. Ireland doesn't even have that. But I think if we don't come out with a definitive approach in the first minute and press them, and if we don't try to string some passes together, we were really struggling with that in the Scotland game, and we just have to string 2-3 minute possessions where we just keep the pressure on their side because you gotta know the best way of defending is attack. So I would hope that we stick with that, and it's going to be interesting. I'm not even going to talk about the Portugal and the Azerbaijan match. I think Ireland's the number 1 priority, and realistically, when you look at this group, it should be the number 1 priority because as much as I think we have talent, Portugal at this moment is not just one of the best European teams. It's one of the best teams in the world when you look at the talent they have. They got a great manager managing them. Our record with them has been okay, but even if we were completely in sync and if we had great chemistry and a great manager, which we don't know how big he's going to be, maybe he's going to be terrible.
Right.
It would be a very big ask. So I think it's realistic for us to get the Ireland win. Of course, try to beat Portugal. I like his approach of him saying I already calculated 9 points, which is gutsy, and I like it, even though it might come back to bite him in the ass. And then the Azerbaijan game, which is going to be a very difficult one considering the trip there. And the Luxembourg game, which he also mentioned, is going to be very tough. Let's win the games we can win. And I hope that we use this qualifying cycle to get ready for the playoffs, because I think realistically we're comfortably second. We're much worse than the pot 1 team, and I think we're much better than the Ireland team, which is one of the worst pot 3 teams. So I think this could be a good qualifying cycle for us to get some experience, get some much needed playing time, get an edge in our system, and then get ready for the playoffs, which are going to be very difficult. But I think if we go in playing the best of our abilities, I think we actually have a shot to make it to Qatar. But game by game, Ireland's the focus, and let's see what we do there.
Yeah, game by game. I'm definitely not counting on the playoffs. Sorry, Luca, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, if I'm a player, man, and I'm looking at Pixie's comments, because this is what it all comes down to, right? It's how he's approaching it and how different it is than our previous managers. If I'm a player and I'm looking at Pixie's comments as opposed to Kristajić's or Tumbakovic's, I'm thinking to myself, hey man, this is a guy that I want to play for. It's confidence inspiring. I'm just trying to put my mind in the player's mind, right, and see how they will approach it. And I like that, man, and I think it's going to give the players hope and hopefully give them the freedom to actually play that beautiful football and play up to their potential. Whereas before, I feel like our managers were limiting in that they were setting them up for not failure, but at least not letting them play to their full potential.
Yeah, exactly. I think definitely his comments should be encouraging for the players because he's showing clearly that he believes in them and that he thinks we should win. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. Ireland is going to be a tough game. Another thing, Ireland, that I noticed is that their longtime goalkeeper, Darren Randolph, is not in the squad. And their other goalkeepers that are called up, they don't really have much experience or any experience at all. I'm not sure who will start. Maybe the young Liverpool keeper, Keller. I think he's the third-string keeper. He probably just plays games for Liverpool under 23s because I don't think I've seen him, on the bench or playing for Liverpool.
Well, he's played a few games when Allison's been out, and being a Liverpool sympathizer, he's been okay, but it's not like
this is not
experience.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not, if he starts, this is going to be the most important game he's ever played in at a young age. I think he's 21. A lot of pressure on a young player who hasn't really played much senior football in his career. their other keepers, not very standout careers either. So I don't know who they're going to start in goal, but anybody that starts, I think we can expect that they're probably not going to be, as good as Randolph, because I remember Randolph made some really good saves against us in that last qualifying cycle when we had Ireland for the World Cup qualifiers, and we ended up winning. I know that game in Ireland, he had a couple good stops. Even in Belgrade, he had a couple good stops. I think he let in a couple of soft ones in that qualifying campaign as well, but he's an experienced keeper who I'm sure Irish fans would be more confident seeing in goal against, teams with good strikers like Serbia and Portugal than they will be seeing, inexperienced younger players who haven't had many international caps. I mean, you can play good in the championships, you can play good in whatever league, but if you haven't performed or even played in a high pressure international, it's a whole different story. I mean, it's really another level of added pressure and another level of attention that's on you, because all of Europe is watching these games. It's not like if you're playing for Preston North End or something like that, when people in Preston are watching and people that are you're playing against. But this is going to be a big game for whoever their keeper is, and I think that's another advantage that we have. Just get balls on net, and hopefully we can unsettle them and make it a long night for them. And the same thing for Ireland. They know our defense is our weak point. They know that we struggle with that. So we struggle with that for a couple of years now, for a while now. So I'm sure they're going to try to expose that. They're going to try to get balls behind us. They're going to try to get balls in, hurt us on set pieces, hurt us on corners, hurt us on everything. So I'm sure they're scouting us well. And I'm sure Pixie's scouting Ireland well as also, although we don't really know what to expect because it is a new campaign. A lot of their players have changed. The old guard is still there. Guys like McLean, as you mentioned, Shane Long. So we'll see what happens in that game. It is definitely a very important game if we want to finish top two, because we'll probably be fighting it with Ireland for the second spot. If we're realistic, Portugal, if you guys seen their squad, their squad is ridiculous. They have so much talent in every position. This looks like possibly like one of the deepest Portuguese teams in a very long time. I think this team they have right now
it's the deepest one ever that I know.
Yeah, they're stronger than
the team that went to the
This is definitely a stronger Portuguese team than the team that won the Euros. I think they have players in every position playing at a high level. So it's going to be very difficult for us to get any results against them. Hopefully, we surprise them and surprise all of us, but I don't expect that to happen because they're just so stacked. And our group is tough because Luxembourg, they've been improving. They're improving side. And I can see them causing trouble. Azerbaijan, up and down results for them. I don't expect a lot from them, but that away trip to Central Asia is always tough. And it's actually a blessing for us, I think, that we have a bit of depth in most of our positions, because the perfect guy to play against Azerbaijan is Mitrovic. He's out of form, yes, but he's still getting, some minutes for Fulham. And a side like Azerbaijan is perfect for him. He feasts on those sides. So everybody's going to be tired because that's going to be our third game. It's going to be our third game of the week. We'll play Ireland and Portugal first, and then we have Azerbaijan on the Tuesday, the following week. So I think Mitro's going to be probably not starting against Ireland and Portugal because he's in worse form than Vlahovic, Jovic, and Despotic. Despotic is killing it. In RPL, he has 11 goals in 19 games, 3 or 4 assists. So even he would possibly be ahead of him. And those two guys, I think Mitrovic and Despotic, are going to probably split the minutes against Azerbaijan next week, and they'll be fresh-legged, and they'll be determined and hungry to get some goals for the national team, because Mitrovic hasn't scored a goal in months, and Despotic hasn't scored a national team goal, I believe. So they'll both be hungry. So I think that works in our advantage. We have some depth in that position. Obviously, we don't have depth in defense, which will be a problem, especially in the latter games. But we'll come to it when we come to it. Right now, the main focus is Ireland and getting a win and starting on a good foot and not digging ourselves in a hole right off the bat.
Couldn't agree more with that. I think that in regards to the Mitrovic point you made, I'm interested because it's 3 games in 6 days, and I wonder how we're going to set up against the Portugal game if Vlahovic plays the Ireland game. That's what I'm interested in. Maybe we go. Because remember last year we went to 4-2-3-1. and we've had classic winners against Portugal, and we had Mitra starting that game. I'm wondering whether Jovic starts that, and we go with maybe a different approach as far as keeping some of the wingers in play. I agree with you in terms of them getting minutes against Azerbaijan. I think that him and Despotich, I'd like to see Despotich get some minutes because he's been playing really well. In that position, ideally, it would have been Odor Stojkovic, but he's defected, so that doesn't really work. But yeah, I mean, there's really nothing much more to say. I think that the Pixie approach, in terms of him wanting us to win 5-4 as opposed to 1-0, is, if you were to ask any scout or analyst, it would be kind of, they wouldn't really agree with that. Their eyes would kind of get wide as a clock, because usually it's the sign of a disorganized team, but he also kept talking about how he wants the team to be organized and how he wants the team to just keep possession. Well, I think he was talking about more about keeping possession and actually stringing passes as opposed to us scoring a bunch of goals, because you can hurt teams even with keeping a lot of possession. I mean, we saw Man City, they just pass the ball for the whole game and they completely tire you out, and then they just score when they want. And speaking of Man City, you look at their squad, you look at the players they had. I mean, Cancelo's playing for them. You look at the team Portugal has. Everyone's in form. Everyone's playing well. They're deep. They've got a manager who's experienced. So I think that game's going to be extremely tough, and that's why I think the focus should be on Ireland. Of course, you should do something against Portugal, but I think that the Ireland game is the one we absolutely got to focus on for a multitude of reasons. Also, because usually when we start qualifying campaigns well in the first game, it goes well. When we don't start well, or when we don't have something optimistic, things usually go pretty bad. So I think that this is a game that actually matters a lot more than people would realize.
Yeah, for sure. And many times we've seen those rough starts in qualifying, and then the rough starts keep going, and it's usually a downward slope for us. We're like a snowball going down a hill. Usually in these qualifying campaigns, if we start poorly, we're probably going to end poorly, just based on our history and what we've seen in the past. We're not really ones to bounce back from results and get things turned around. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Of course, talking about strikers and the lineups we'd like to see. Milinkovic has to start. He's got 11 goals in his last 15 or 16 Serie A games. He's on fire. The goals he's scoring as well. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the highlights of the last game, the hat-trick he had against Benevento. I mean, that goal, like, whoa, wow. Like, he's doing things that make you think, like, this guy has, like, world-class potential.
Right.
Like, that's what the goals he's scoring are showing, it's suggesting. So I think, of course, and you look, you mentioned earlier that he was very impressive in the Nations League. Definitely was. Every game he came on, he made a difference. He could have scored a lot of goals. He scored one goal, but he could have scored a lot more. He was a huge nuisance to all the teams in our Nations League group. The game changed, essentially, when he came into the game. And he's definitely a guy that is ready for that next step. Then we talk about midfield. A lot of guys in good form. Of course, SMS, Sergej is in great form. Filip Kostic, the best form of his life. Then we have Gude, who's still playing for Sevilla. Maksimovic, who's doing his regular thing for Getafe. Radonic, who's not really, he left Marseille, and now he's on Hertha Berlin in the Bundesliga, but he hasn't really done much there as that team continues to struggle. So it will be interesting to see who starts in midfield. Of course, we all know the debate about Tadic and Sergej, if they can play together or not. Pixie seems to think that they can, which remains to be seen. I really don't know what to expect from the midfield. We don't know if it's going to be 4 in the midfield or 5, or what he's going to do, if we're going to play with the wing-backs again, because Lazovic is also in great form for Hellas Verona in the Serie A. He has a lot of options, not in defense, because other than Milinkovic, who's doing his regular thing for Fiorentina, and Stefan Mitrovic is also having a good season in France, we must mention, for Strasbourg, as he's the captain of that team. Other than those two guys, it's very hard to predict who's going to start there. I mean, even the third, or even if we play with 3 in the back, do you go with Uroš Spajic, who's lost his spot in Feyenoord in the Eredivisie? I think he played the last game, but he definitely lost his spot for a good month or two there. So I don't know if that's an option. Milos Vilekovic as well plays every week for Werder Bremen, but he's more of a right-sided center back as opposed to a left-sided one, or a central. He plays centrally as well, but not on the left side. So it's it's going to be really tough to see what happens there. And if we play with 4 in the back, I guess you play Milinkovic, Mitrovic, and then Gajic and Mladenovic, I would assume, which would be interesting. But I don't know how that will work, especially against I really don't know how that will work. Obviously, as you mentioned, Alex, it's more about the principles than the formation. But he doesn't have much time to put in those principles in place. We have 2 practices, 2 training sessions before the first game. And that's his first 2 training sessions. We haven't had any friendlies, no time to implement a system. I'm sure he's been texting and emailing players, but that's one thing. Putting it into practice is a whole another thing. So a lot to think about, especially going into these games.
No doubt, man. And one person I don't want to give up on yet, because I think he definitely showed flashes of potential, especially for the national team. I know he was a beast at Partizan, but for the national team too, I thought he was well. But Pavlovic, I don't want to give up on him yet. I think you should also get some minutes. Obviously we've seen what he did at Partizan, but things haven't been going his way recently. However, he had a few performances for the national team, not the best performances, but still a super young guy. Still, I think a lot of potential for the future.
Yeah, and he's doing well now in Belgium. Ever since he went to Circle Berge, he's doing a lot better. He's playing every week. I think their results are better as well. He scored a goal or 2, so things are looking up for him. He had some shaky showings in the Nations League, but definitely still a player for the future. And it didn't work out for him at Monaco, but he's very young defenders take longer to develop, so we'll see what happens there. Alex, so what are your thoughts in terms of lineup information for Ireland?
Well, there's a lot of ways you can go. I've been breaking my head over how the 4 at the back really is what I've been thinking about. If we go with 3, I think the system's pretty much set in place in terms of the back line. The goalkeeping situation, we've seen the French players that maybe may not show up. So maybe they can get a start, but Mitrovic and Moore in good form, both in good form, so I don't think there's much of an issue in that. Although I still have flashbacks to Milinkovic going up against Ireland in that game back in September 2016. I still remember him dribbling in the halfway line and nearly losing possession in the 90th minute. So maybe they've kept that in mind, and maybe they're going to try and press him. The defense itself, I feel really bad that Milinovic isn't part of this team, because I think he's tailor-made for 3 at the back defense, but even 2 at the back, because our options, as you've said, are limited. Milinkovic and Milinkovic are probably the only ones getting minutes. Stefan Mitrovic has been, he's been inconsistent as he usually is. But I think that I would still stick with the wingbacks, just because I think that if you go for 3, you can pack the midfield, which is where I think that Ireland actually is fairly weak. And you look at the amount of options we have. I mean, we can rotate between Maksimovic and maybe dropping SMS deeper. I think that somebody mentioned in one of the tweets that he tweeted out that playing a system that is fairly similar to Inter or Lazio's, where Milinkovic-Savic isn't really pushed forward as an attacking mid, but he's pushed forward as a part of a 3 in midfield. Because you remember in the Nations League games, he was playing, basically second to Schreiber. He was behind Mikro and he was next to Tadic. And in this formation that was proposed, he would probably play in an equal role, which is actually what he plays with Lazio, but it would require us packing the midfield with more options, which I'm fine with. The option of putting Goulet there is people are probably going to have traumatic flashbacks to the Scotland game, but he was actually, I think, fairly decent in the Scotland game. At least this time we have options where if he's not in the midfield, we can still go out and put out a good midfield if he's forced to come back in defense. It's a shame that Nastasic is playing for A, Schalke, who's been terrible in defense, and B, he's injured himself, because he's the only left-footed center back who's in any kind of form who would actually fit. Pavlovic, I think, is somebody that could be useful. The problem is that at this moment in time, his best attribute is bringing the ball out of the back, and one of the things that Pixie mentioned in the press conference was that he didn't actually want defenders to bring it out to the back. He made the wisecrack comment, well, you're not bringing the ball out to go dribble past the whole team and go into their box. You're just bringing it out to a certain point in your own half. So you don't even really need to be like Beckenbauer or someone like that with the ball. So
hence why Collado is not called up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because he would either just ping that long diagonal ball or dribble for 40 yards and get dispossessed.
Right.
So it depends whether Pavlovic has learned something in terms of his positioning, because really the difference for him was his physical attributes, his size, his speed. That was something that made the difference for him, but he hasn't gotten adjusted to the speed of the Belgian league. And without that, his games in the Nations League were not impressive. So it's something that I wonder where we're going to go with. Now, the 4 at the back is where you can have so many options. I mean, you can either go with a diamond, because you look at the amount of midfielders we have. I mean, we can easily put three central midfielders. We can put, Maksimovic and SMS and Gudde there, and we can go with two strikers. We can go with I wouldn't want to go with a 4-3-3. I think that the only issue that we have right now in terms of our squad depth is that we don't really have natural wingers that can attack. All of our players that are wide players are essentially fullback. I understand that Lazovic and Kostic are great, but they're not exactly typical wingers in the sense that, maybe a Salah or Mane or even someone like that, where they cut inside and they're in the opposing half. They cover a lot of distance for their teams. I'm not saying that they can't shoot or pass, but that's not what they're specifically designed to do. They have a different role, which is their speed and their physicality and their tackling ability to create a difference on the wing play. They're not exactly known as goal scorers. I mean, Kostic played so many games as an attacker, and I think he only has 4 or 5 goals in the national team, and Lazovic as well. So, and the other guys, Nadani's just been out of form. Nobody's calling up Soleimani, who would maybe be a good option because he's good on the ball and he can at least shoot the distance. I wouldn't want to see, somebody mentioned maybe pushing Lazovic and Kostic in the back four as fullbacks, as classic fullbacks, which I actually think wouldn't be a bad idea because they can cover that. And B, the difference that we would have in terms of the overlaps would be fantastic. So that was one of the options I was thinking of. And the reason why, just to close out, why I wouldn't want to go with forward with that, because it's very difficult to find the wingers. And also, the Tadic SMS debate, I think that you can find a way to play them together, but I think you're going to have to sacrifice one of them, either by pushing SMS deeper to be behind Tadic, which we saw in the World Cup was a bad idea, or you've pushed Tadic out wide, which doesn't necessarily have to be a bad idea because he plays there for Ajax, but we don't get the most out of his potential, and he's kind of limited in the side. So, maybe it would be different if he has a fullback to overlap, because when we tried that at the World Cup, he had Ivanovic behind him, who at that point in his career didn't have the capacity to overlap because he was just too tired, and he has to go forward and track back in defense. Maybe if we play Lazovic or Gajic potentially in that position, somebody who's a more natural fullback, they would be used to the overlap. But I think that it would require putting a lot of faith in two guys. You mentioned Milinovic and Gajic. Milinovic has been playing fantastic, but he's been playing great in a more offensive role. You'd be putting a lot of faith in two guys that really haven't gotten used to that pressure that they would have playing for the national team, and they've had no experience playing together. It would be they wouldn't have many caps. But the Ireland game is playing good because of the quality of the opponent. But I think long term, that's not the way we should go. Whether we go with two strikers, it opens up other options in midfield. The ideal tandem for me would probably maybe be to go with someone like Vlahovic and Jovic, perhaps, because they're two players that are somewhat in form. But I think everything else in that situation is going to be you're just taking big risks. So I'd stick with 3 at the back and see what you can do with that. I'd stick with the fullbacks or with the wingbacks rather than creating the difference. And whether you go with 2 up front or whether you go with the faster players behind the striker is another option, because if you remember the Norway game, what really brought us a difference was Tadic and Juricic picking up those second balls in midfield because of their pace, their movement, their intelligence. When we tried to stack the forward line with SMS and Mitrovic, we were lacking mobility and lacking movement. Juricic has been playing great, as you guys have seen in Sassuolo. He's been scoring goals and been involved. So there's a lot of options for him to go with. I'm very interested to see what he does. But I would personally stick with the 3 at the back because, as he mentioned, our 2 best performances in that system came against Norway and Russia. The Scotland game, I don't think it was a formation issue. I think it was an approach issue. And also on the final point, that in the national team, the one thing I hope I see from Pixie, something that I haven't seen from any one of our managers since Radovan Antic left, which is utilizing our size on set pieces. And I mentioned that because the national team football is a lot about organization, set plays, and motivation. I'm sure he can bring one of the 3. I think the motivation factor is there. The organization is going to take time, and the set pieces, I mean, we have guys that can cross the ball very well, and we have size. We have guys that can score goals with their head. We have guys that are tall, that are physically strong. And since Antic, remember in the Antic qualifying cycle, we had 7 or 8 goals. A third of our goals came from set pieces. No manager since has managed to do that, not even Muslim. We didn't score any goals from headers under Muslim, and I hope that we can change that, because to be a team as tall as we are and as physically strong as we can be, and to have no threats from set plays is something that I think should change. So I'm hoping that he really worked on set plays. Now, Ireland maybe isn't the best opponent for set plays because they're strong, and we know how British teams defend set pieces, but I'm hoping that we can utilize that to our advantage because we have the guys that can do it. And I think for national team football, that's going to be one of your default weapons anyways. And if we have the guys that can jump high and they can score goals, and we have guys that can cross, why not put more of an accent on that? Especially considering it's going to take time for his system and his philosophy to take place. And if that's not working, we need to have a plan B. So I'm hoping that they developed a lot of attention to, or they garnered a lot of attention to the set pieces, because I think we could be dangerous from that.
Yeah.
Considering our potential.
Yeah, man. I'm a big fan of playing players that are in form, and I don't think you have a choice here other than to go three in the back, given our current, the people who've been called up for defense. I think the key to our success will be this puzzle of Milinkovic-Savic and Tadic. I really do. And I'm saying that for the whole qualifying cycle. Because if you can figure out how to play those two guys on the same team and make the team function well, it's going to be a problem for any opposition. If that means that, SMS is more of a box-to-box player like he is at Lazio, then let's try it again. I mean, just because it didn't work under, Krstajic, who is not really any sort of rated manager, doesn't mean we shouldn't try it again. Push him a little bit back, let Tadic go in his natural role as kind of that center attacking midfielder. And let's see what happens again. I think the Pixie will bring a fresh perspective to this, or at least I hope so. And definitely more experienced than Krstajic, so hopefully he'll be able to crack this puzzle, because I think that is where our success will be.
That's right, and you know what? The great thing is, at least there's something to be excited about. At least there's something to look forward to, because with Pixie, at least there exists a chance of something positive and something great happening. And I think, Alex, that you mentioned that he does have the full support, or not the full support, but most of the support of the nation behind him. None of our managers have really had that in a long time. Definitely not since Antic himself or Mihalic at least. So it's promising. I think his comments are promising. I think the form of our players is great, but the form of our players is always great, so it's hard to judge it by that. I mean, we had amazing form coming into the Scotland game, right? And we saw what happened. Of course, our team was decimated with coronavirus, but still, no excuses for that and that poor performance. But we'll see. Big games coming up, a lot of excitement, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of uneasiness. And let's get some predictions going to wrap things up. I think I'll be happy if we show a consistent team and a consistent system in these three games. And, of course, if we can get at least 7 points, 6 or 7 points, that would be amazing. If we get 9, probably have a heart attack, because we'll have one foot in Qatar, basically, if we get 9 points. So we'll see how it goes. I am cautious, also somewhat optimistic, more so excited, and looking forward to seeing what we'll see, because we really don't know what to expect. And I think Pixie's taking this very seriously. He's definitely going to go all out and give it his all to make this a success, and that makes me happy. But we'll see how it goes. Luca, what would you be happy with from these three games?
I mean, I'll be happy with 6 points from the 3 games. And for the first game, I'll give the first game prediction. A 2-0 win for Serbia would be my prediction. 6 points out of the 3 games. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, as strong as Portugal is and as deep as they are, that we can get 7 points out of the 3 games, but we'll see what happens.
Alex, what about you? What would you be happy with from these 3 games?
I'm going with the Pixie approach. I'm going 9 out of 9.
Oh, hell yeah.
No, I mean, you know what? Listen, the Ireland game, I think, is going to be a great test for us to see. It's going to be a first kind of putting the feet in the water and getting their feet wet. Very interested to see how we shake off the rust from the Scotland game in terms of going up against a team that plays similar to Scotland, except a team that doesn't have the Scotland talent. So I'm expecting a 2-0 win. I think that just the talent of our players and the form, and also I think the serious approach. I think this time it's not a situation like the Scotland game where everyone expected us to win, and there was a lot of pressure on the team, and there wasn't really a lot of not confidence, but they went into that game pretty petrified. They're going into this game hopefully, jacked up and motivated from Pixie, because he's put pressure on them to achieve something, because they know if they don't perform, he's probably going to cost them out. They're not going to be starters. So no on that. We didn't touch on the Azerbaijan game. We didn't really talk about, because there's not much to talk about. I mean, most of the players played Karabag. And if the away trip is tough, but if we can't beat Azerbaijan, then what's the point of us even trying to qualify for the car? I'm going to say we win that one by 3-1. And the Portugal game, I think we're going to give them a good run for their money. I think we're going to surprise them. I think if we press them, we can actually do something. The last game that we played against them, when we pressed them high, we played a very good first half, and it was only due to individual mistakes that we lost. So I wouldn't be surprised if we can pull something like that. Because remember, it was Milinkovic's first game. And that game against Portugal, we actually played okay the whole way. It was just the mistakes of the defense and the Milinkovic mistake dropping the ball in the first half that cost us the win. But we played very well. We created chances. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get something out of that game. I'm still going to go with it. I'm still going to go with the conservative 3-2. I think there's going to be a lot of goals. I think Portugal's going to win it just because of the form. I mean, Fernandes has been scoring all the goals for Man United. Ronaldo, regardless of how bad Juventus has been, is still Cristiano Ronaldo. João Cancelo has been great. João Felix has been playing well for Atletico, who's pushing for a title. They play on set pieces. At this moment, they just got too much quality for us. And I think if we had a couple friendlies, I'd actually feel confident about us getting something. But because this is going to be the second game, no practices and no nothing, and we're going up against a team that is A, better than us, and B, has a manager who's been there for a long time. They know what they're doing. I think it's just too much of an ask. We're not going to have the fans either, which could make some kind of difference. I'm going to say 3-2 Portugal. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. But I think because of our defensive issues, our lack of chemistry, and our lack of talent, ultimately, Portugal is going to be too much for us. But 2-0 for Ireland, 3-2 for Portugal, and 3-1 for us against Azerbaijan.
Well, one thing about Portugal, though, is they tend to start their qualifying campaigns slow fairly often. So that's another thing that we could use. Usually they ramp up into form in the middle of their campaign, and towards the end they're just, dominant. But at the start, the first 2-3 games, they're not that great historically. We've seen them have a couple of blunders and a couple of drop points and bad results in the beginning of campaigns as they take a little while to get warmed up. Let's face it, they for sure think they're going to qualify and finish first. So they're not as motivated for those first 2 games as, they are for the rest of the qualifying when, they have a bad result and the coach yells at them and they take it more seriously. So I think that's another thing that could be in our advantage for sure.
I would agree. They remember the Euros. They squeaked through as the third team in their group, and they got through in 3 draws. And I think only won 1 game at the Euros. It was just penalties and extra time wins. So maybe that's the way to catch them off guard. But I still think that, granted, because of the fact that they're going to be playing and guarding themselves for the Euros, which we're not, maybe this is a chance to kind of catch them off guard. Who knows? I mean, we get off 9 points. The Luxembourg game is going to be a big game, a lot like the Georgia game as well was in the Russian qualifiers, where we got off to a good start and then we had a tough away game. But it's going to be interesting. I think if we get 7, I'd be ecstatic. I mean, anything more above 7, I would be, would be just a dream, because it gives you such a great condition, especially because there's so few games. We're one of the groups that has only 5 teams,
right,
as opposed to the other groups that have 6. So every point's going to be even more valuable in every one of these games. And so, but as you said, I mean, they've had bad starts, and then they've ratcheted up the quality and played better in the later parts of the round. But at the same time, they didn't take the Ukraine game that seriously. The first game, they dropped points by missing a bunch of chances there. And by the time Ukraine got into form, and by the time they played them in the return leg, Ukraine beat them. So if we can actually squeak out something, and I'm sure that as time goes on, Pixie's going to be better. I mean, what he's going to do remains to be seen. But unlike Steinitz, this is a guy who has managed somewhere, who is just, I think, naturally just a more football-oriented guy. He was a playmaker. He understands the game more. He was almost like a coach on the pitch in terms of the way he organized teams and the way that he played. And finally, he's somebody that wants an attacking style of football and who's worked with big names. He's worked with Arsene Wenger. He's worked with Ivica Osip. He's worked with Franz Beckenbauer. I don't think that this is someone who doesn't know football. His coaching staff, some people can say there's a lot to be desired for. He made some changes that are positive, some changes that are negative. I do like the fact we're getting a Japanese conditioning coach in. I think that's going to be great because we should be prepared for our games. We should be physically prepared for all the challenges that we have, even though we have a team that can run very well and is very physically dominant, but we can utilize that. It's one thing to be physically strong and fast. If you don't know how to use it, it doesn't really count for much. So I understand the optimism for the Portugal game, and I share it. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we get something out of it, but I still think, knowing what we know, considering, like I said, the lack of chemistry, the lack of talent overall, and the lack of defensive options primarily, and the form that Portugal's in, I still think it's going to be a big ask. They play the Nations League very well, too, so it's not like they're going into this game completely cold. But I'm excited to see what happens. I haven't been this excited in a long time because there's so many things that have gone on, both positive and negative. All the interviews that we saw from, former players and managers talking about the former regime, which was very eye-opening. And shout out to Slavian Muslim, who was just fantastic in that interview he gave, and he was absolutely sensational. And look at Milinkovic and Managerial. I hope we're enjoying their retirement, but that was our answer. There was so much chaos that's been going on.
I love the start of a qualifying campaign. It's always optimism in the air. The roses still smell good, and then it's before we get all bitter and disappointed.
Hey, but
the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah,
that's right.
No doubt, man. I will say that's an important point, though, on the excitement factor of it, because I must say, even for myself, I haven't been this excited in quite a while, for a game, for a national team game. So, and a lot of that has to do with Pixie and his aggressive approach. Like I said, I think it fits us well. So, I'm hoping for and expecting a big win come Wednesday, dude.
Yeah, we'll see, and I'm sure we'll hopefully do a podcast right after the Portugal game. So either we'll have a lot more to say about everything then. We'll see what kind of mood we're in, and we'll see what happens. But all we can do is hope for the best and expect the worst, as is the number one motto for every Serbian football fan. And I think that should wrap it up for this week. We covered a lot for the upcoming games, and then we'll see what happens during the week, and we'll discuss either something very positive, a turnaround in our national team's fortunes, or something probably not that great. So hopefully for the positive side of things. Again, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll talk again next week. Hoping for a big win against Ireland.